The world is a crucible forging every heart through trials that spare no one. Loss stings like a winter wind, betrayal cuts deeper than any blade, and uncertainty clouds the path ahead. In a quiet hospital room, a family mourns a loved one's fading breath. In a dimly lit office, a worker faces the sting of rejection. In the silence of a sleepless night, doubt whispers, "How will you go?" and the question echoes in every heart. How do we press forward when the world feels heavy? Some seek solace in motivational speeches or self-help books, and there's merit in those tools. But there's a deeper strength, a transformative force that doesn't just help you endure, it reshapes you from within. That force is faith in God. This is not a mere belief or a Sunday ritual. It's a conviction that anchors the mind, a fire that warms the heart, a light that guides through the darkest nights. Picture Clara, a teacher whose world unraveled when her school closed unexpectedly. Her savings dwindled, her confidence wavered, and fear crept in like a thief. Small apartment, she opened her Bible, her fingers tracing a verse that became her lifeline. John Chapter 16, verse 33 states, "In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." Jesus didn't promise a life free of trouble, he promised trouble would come. But he also promised victory through him. For Clara, faith was not a passive hope, but a deliberate choice to trust, a decision to stand firm when everything else shook. Her story echoes countless others who across centuries have found in God a strength that transforms despair into hope. This journey is not about escaping trials, but about building a mind so rooted in faith that no storm can uproot it. Let us walk through 11 ways faith fortifies the mind-weaving stories of ordinary people and timeless scriptures into a tapestry of resilience. Amid life's unyielding storms, faith lays the groundwork for a mind that stands unshaken. No one walks through life unscathed. The wisest scholar, the strongest warrior, the most devout believer all face trials that threaten to break them. A business collapses under debt's crushing weight. A diagnosis dims hope, a dream fades into regret's shadow. Many falter their lives built on fragile pillars, wealth that vanishes, status that crumbles, praise that turns to scorn. Jesus spoke of this in Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27, confirming telling of two builders. One anchored his house on rock, heeding God's words. When floods roared and winds howled, it stood firm. The other built on sand, ignoring the truth, and watched his home collapse. Faith is that rock, the unwavering certainty that God reigns even when chaos surrounds. Picture Javier, a carpenter whose workshop burned to ash one fateful night. His tools, his livelihood, his pride gone in hours. Friends urged him to despair, to abandon his trade. But Javier had built his life on something stronger than wood or nails. Each morning he knelt in the quiet, not demanding instant restoration, but trusting God's unseen plan. He took odd jobs, hammering in borrowed spaces, rebuilding step by painful step. His hands blistered, his heart wavered, but his faith held firm. Months later, a new workshop rose, not because the fire spared him, but because his foundation endured. This echoes Job's story, who lost children, wealth, and health in a single devastating blow. Yet in his anguish, Job chapter 1, verse 21 affirms, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job's faith wasn't tied to his possessions, but to God's eternal sovereignty. Javier's resilience reflects countless others who stand firm when life shakes. A mother battles cancer, yet prays with hope, her trust unwavering. A student fails a crucial exam, yet rises believing in a path unseen. Many build on sand, money, fame, approval. When these crumble, despair engulfs them. But faith in God is a rock declaring my worth isn't in my successes or losses, but in the one who holds me. When you root your mind in this truth, you can lose everything: job, health. Your peace flows from the one who walks beside you, not what you clutch in your hand. This is the first key anchor your soul in God's truth, and no storm will sweep you away. As we shift to our perspective, we'll see how faith transforms defeat into victory. When doubt threatens to dim our hope, faith reshapes our thoughts into a mindset of triumph. Believing in God is a spark, but if your mind clings to shadows of defeat, that spark fades. Many pray, read scripture, yet live haunted by relentless doubts. What if I fail? What if God turns away? This is not faith in full bloom. It's a mind unrenewed, trapped in fear's grip. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 instructs, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Faith is a revolution in thought. A shift from what if to God is turning despair into determination. Imagine Amara, a nurse, facing a certification exam that held her future in its balance. Doubt whispered she wasn't ready, that failure would define her. Her heart raced, her hands trembled, and expectations weighed heavy. But in a quiet moment, she recalled David before Goliath, a giant who dwarfed Israel's army. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 37 records David's bold words, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David didn't shrink before the giant. His mind was fixed on God's proven faithfulness. Amara took a breath, prayed, and studied with resolve. She entered the exam room, trusting not her own strength, but God's. She passed, not because doubt vanished, but because faith outshone it, lighting her path. Contrast this with the Israelites freed from Egypt's chains, yet trembling before Canaan's giants. Numbers chapter 13 tells of their despair. "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes." They saw miracles, seas parted, manna fallen, yet their minds clung to fear, not God's power. They chose defeat, yearning for slavery over promise. Amara's victory was a mindset reborn. She saw herself as God saw her, capable, called, never alone. Many falter here, believing in God, but thinking like victims, praying for help, yet bracing for failure. Faith demands a new lens, one that gazes at challenges and declares, "If God is with me, no obstacle is too great." Picture a sailor in a storm, trusting a compass over raging waves. Faith is that compass guiding thoughts to God's promises, steadying the course. Amara's story resonates with others. A father faces job loss, yet trusts God's provision. A student confronts rejection, yet believes in a purpose unseen. These are minds renewed not by denying reality, but by seeing it through faith's clarity. To live with faith is to stand before life's giants, exams, failures, fears, and proclaim, "My God is bigger." This is the second key. Renew your mind with faith, transforming your perspective from defeat to victory through Christ. As fear looms closer, we'll see how faith breaks its chains, turning trembling steps into bold strides. Where fear seeks to bind us, faith ignites courage to conquer anxiety. Fear is a shadow that haunts every soul, whispering of failure, rejection, or the unknown. It guards the thresholds of dreams, a new venture, a bold calling a step into uncertainty, and bids us retreat. The challenge isn't feeling fear, it's refusing to let it rule. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 assures, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." Faith doesn't erase fear's presence. It overpowers its influence, granting courage to move forward despite a trembling heart. Picture Sophia, a writer, was offered a chance to publish her first novel. The opportunity thrilled her, but fear roared louder. What if it fails? What if critics tear it apart? Her stomach churned, her sleep fled. But in a quiet moment, she remembered Peter stepping onto the water. Matthew chapter 14 tells how he walked toward Jesus, defying the waves until he saw the storm and sank. His faith held until his focus shifted to fear. Sophia chose to fix her eyes on God, not the risks. She submitted her manuscript, heart pounding, and it found a publisher, not because fear vanished, but because faith was stronger. Fear lies claiming you're alone, inadequate, doomed. Faith answers with truth. God is with you, His power sufficient, His plan secure. Sophia's courage echoes in others. A young father fears for his child's illness, yet prays with hope. A student dreads a public speech, yet steps to the podium, trusting God's strength. Fear is universal, but letting it steer is a choice. When fear knocks, faith opens the door, declaring this spirit is not from God. Consider the disciples trembling in a storm-tossed boat while Jesus slept untroubled. Their fear saw only the waves. Faith sees the one who calms them. Picture a child in the dark, clutching a parent's hand, fear fading in the warmth of presence. That's faith trusting God's nearness over fear's threats. Sophia learned this acting despite doubts, finding victory in God's presence. This courage is not reckless bravado, but quiet trust. It's the student applying for a scholarship despite rejections, the entrepreneur risking a venture despite uncertainty, the believer sharing faith despite ridicule. Faith doesn't promise a fearless heart. It promises a sound mind rooted in God's power. When you stand at a crossroads, fear will whisper retreat, but faith will urge you forward step by trembling step. This is the third key. Fix your heart on God's presence, and fear will lose its grip, giving way to courage that defies the storm. As anxiety presses closer, we'll see how faith weaves peace into life's chaos. As anxiety clouds the soul, faith unveils a peace that holds firm in chaos. Anxiety is fear's persistent echo, a gnawing worry that clouds the mind and steals rest. It thrives when we fixate on problems, bills, uncertainties, futures unknown rather than God's presence. Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 to 7 advises, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God which surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." This peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of God. Imagine Elena, a single mother drowning in debt. Bills piled high, her children's needs loomed, and sleepless nights tallied her fears. Anxiety gripped her, whispering that hope was lost. But in a quiet moment, she turned to prayer. Inspired by Jesus in the storm, Mark chapter 4 tells how the disciples panicked as waves crashed over their boat, yet Jesus slept secure in his Father's control. Elena followed his example, surrendering her worries and thanking God for past provision. Peace came not because her debts vanished, but because she trusted God's sovereignty. Her story echoes others: a father facing a child's illness, a student awaiting exam, results a worker fearing layoffs. Anxiety grows when we dwell on what's wrong, but faith shifts our gaze to the one who's in charge. Elena's peace was no ordinary calm. It was a shield guarding her mind when logic faltered. Picture a soldier steady in battle, trusting his commander's plan despite chaos. That's God's peace-defying circumstances rooting the heart in divine assurance. Elena learned to pray not just for solutions, but for trust, finding rest in God's presence. Many seek peace in wealth, control, or success, but these crumble like sandcastles before waves. Faith offers a peace that endures, anchored in God's unchanging nature. Consider a weary traveler finding refuge in a storm. That's the peace faith brings, a haven amid turmoil. Others, like Elena, find it too. A businessman facing bankruptcy prays and finds calm. A mother awaiting a diagnosis trusts and rests. This peace is not denial, but surrender, a choice to lift eyes from problems to the problem solver. This is the fourth key: trade anxiety for prayer and let God's peace guard your heart. Faith doesn't promise a life without storms, but it promises a mind unshaken by them. Elena's story shows this truth. Peace comes not from solved problems, but from a heart rooted in God. As we face life's heavier blows, we'll see how faith builds resilience to endure collapse. When life's heaviest blows threaten to shatter us, faith forges resilience to rise again. Life's darkest trials, lost dreams, broken plans, crushing losses test the soul's endurance. When a business fails or a loved one is lost, despair beckons urging surrender. Yet faith breeds resilience, a strength that rises through pain. James chapter 1, verses 2-3 encourages, "Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience." Trials are not the end, but a forge, shaping a heart that endures unyielding to despair's weight. Picture Michael, a chef whose restaurant collapsed during a recession. The dining room, once alive with laughter and clinking glasses, stood empty. Creditors hounded him and savings vanished. Friends urged him to quit to find a new trade, their voices echoing his own doubts. But Michael's faith was anchored deeper than his losses. Each night he knelt in prayer, not for instant restoration, but for strength to persevere. He took small catering jobs, cooking in cramped kitchens, serving at local events. Each tray carried, each dish crafted, was a step toward rebuilding, fueled by trust in God's unseen plan. Genesis chapter 37 tells of Joseph sold into slavery by his brothers, imprisoned unjustly, yet rising to lead Egypt through unwavering faith. Michael's journey mirrored this, finding purpose in persistence. Months later, a new business emerged, not because the recession spared him, but because his faith held firm, guiding him through the ashes. Others embody this resilience. A widow presses on for her family despite grief, an entrepreneur restarts after failure, and a student rises after academic setbacks. Faith reframes trials as forge fires, like a tree deepening roots and storms growing stronger with each gust. Michael didn't curse his losses. He trusted God's purpose, like Joseph saw divine intent in betrayal. This resilience is not denial, but defiance, refusing to let loss define you. It's the courage to take one step, then another, believing God's plan unfolds even in ruins. This is the fifth key: embrace trials as opportunities to build unshakable faith, rising with hope. As we turn to decision-making, we'll see how this resilience informs wise choices amid adversity's storms. Amid the swirl of emotions, faith guides choices with divine clarity. Emotions are fickle guides, shifting like shadows in a storm. Anger sparks rash words, fear urges retreat, and sadness clouds judgment. Choices made in their heat often lead to regret, a job quit in frustration, a relationship rushed in longing, a dream abandoned in despair. Faith offers a steady compass, anchoring decisions in God's eternal truth. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 7 asserts, "For we walk by faith, not by sight," urging us to trust God's wisdom over fleeting feelings, ensuring choices that endure beyond the moment. Professional stood at a crossroads, a lucrative corporate job promising wealth or a quiet calling to teach. Friends pushed her toward money, warning that teaching offered little status or security. Fear whispered of financial strain. Pride urged her to chase ambition. Yet Priya paused, seeking God's guidance through prayer, inspired by Moses' obedience in Exodus chapter 4. Despite his fears and stammering tongue, Moses trusted God's promise to lead Israel, stepping forward despite inadequacy. Priya followed suit, choosing teaching. Her first classroom was modest, her paycheck slim, but joy filled her heart, not because the choice was easy, but because it aligned with God's purpose. Her decision defied societal pressure, rooted in faith's steady light. Contrast this with Saul, who in 1 Samuel chapter 13 acted impulsively, offering an unauthorized sacrifice when Samuel delayed, costing him his kingdom. Faith filters choices like a captain navigating fog with a trusted compass. Priya's fulfillment came from aligning with God's call, not chasing wealth. Others falter, letting emotions drive rushing relationships, chasing fleeting gain, or quitting in frustration. Faith demands we ask, does this honor God? A father forgives a wayward child, not out of ease, but trust. A worker chooses integrity over profit, guided by faith's clarity. This is the sixth key. Let faith steer decisions, grounding you in divine wisdom, not emotions sway. As we explore patience, we'll see how faith trusts God's timing, anchoring us when haste tempts us to rush. When haste tempts us to rush ahead, faith teaches trust in God's perfect timing. We live in a world that demands instant results, quick fixes, immediate blessings, answers now. A job offer, a healed relationship, a fulfilled dream, we want them on our schedule. But God's plans unfold in His own time, often slower than our impatient hearts desire. Faith demands patience. An active trust that God's timing is perfect, even when waiting feels unbearable. Hannah and David, a couple longing for a child, faced years of negative tests, doctor visits, and whispered prayers. Friends offered advice, adopt, move on, give up, but their hearts clung to God's promise. In quiet moments, they drew strength from Abraham's story in Genesis chapter 17, who waited 25 years for Isaac, trusting God through decades of silence. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31, promises those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. Hannah and David prayed not just for a child, but for trust in God's plan. After years, their child arrived not on their timeline, but God's deepening their faith. Contrast this with Saul's impatience in 1 Samuel chapter 13, acting rashly and losing his kingdom. Patience is not idleness, but trust, like a farmer planting seeds, believing they'll grow despite unseen roots. Others walk this path. A writer awaits publication, an entrepreneur rebuilds after loss, a believer prays for revival. Hannah and David's hope endured because they trusted God's timing, finding strength in His promises. Faith doesn't rush. It rests, believing God's plan is worth the wait. This is the seventh key: trust God's timing, finding resilience in His perfect seasons. As we turn to identity, we'll see how faith grounds our worth in God's unchanging truth. When the world demands conformity, faith anchors our worth in God's unchanging truth. The world measures worth by fleeting standards like status trends, leaving hearts fragile, swayed by every opinion. Seeking human approval is a trap, bending us to fit molds that shift with the crowd. Faith roots identity in God's eternal love, unshaken by criticism. Zoe, a teenager, faced mockery for her faith. Classmates called her odd, their taunts amplified by social media's relentless pressure to conform. Insecurity crept in, urging her to hide her beliefs. But Zoe turned to Scripture, finding Jesus' example, who stood firm amid scorn, his worth rooted in the Father. Galatians became her anchor, urging her to live for God, not peers. Zoe began sharing her faith boldly, not to win approval, but because she knew she was God's child, loved and called. Her confidence grew not from fitting in, but from standing out for God. Many chase applause, crumbling under criticism, but faith offers freedom like a tree unmoved by passing winds. A worker chooses honesty despite ridicule. A student holds to conviction despite scorn, all rooted in God's view of their worth. This is the eighth key: live for God's approval, finding unshakable freedom in His truth. Zoe's journey shows that identity in God brings confidence to stand firm. As we face fear, we'll see how this secure identity fuels the courage to press forward boldly. As fear guards our dreams, faith kindles courage to press forward boldly. Fear guards every dream whispering retreat before risks failure, rejection, the unknown. It looms at the edge of callings, urging safety over boldness. Yet faith ignites courage, overpowering fear's grip. Joshua chapter 1 verse 9 commands, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Caleb, a missionary called to a war-torn region, faced violence, rejection, and uncertainty. Fear urged him to stay safe, whispering of dangers ahead. But Caleb trusted God's presence, inspired by David's faith before Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17. David didn't focus on the giant's size, but on God's power, declaring victory through trust. Caleb stepped forward, heart pounding, his mission thriving despite peril. His courage wasn't fearlessness, but faith and action, believing God was greater than any threat. Others walk this path. A student speaks despite stage fright. An entrepreneur risks failure for a dream. A believer shares faith despite ridicule. Faith doesn't erase fear, it empowers action, like a soldier advancing with a trusted commander. Caleb's success came from trusting God's promise, not from an absence of danger. This is the 9th key move, with faith defying fear's chains with God's strength. As chaos looms, we'll see how faith weaves peace into life's storms. When chaos roars around us, faith weaves a serenity that endures. Chaos breeds worry bills, crises, uncertainties, stealing rest from the heart. Faith offers peace, not by removing storms, but by anchoring us in God's presence. John chapter 14 verse 27 records, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you." Philippians chapter 4 verses 6 to 7 promises, "The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." Grace, a mother facing her son's surgery, battled fear as hospital waits stretched long. Prayer became her refuge, inspired by Daniel's calm in the lion's den. Daniel trusted God's sovereignty, unmoved by danger. Grace surrendered her worries, finding calm not in outcomes, but in God's control. Her peace sustained her like a traveler finding refuge in a storm. Others find it too. A worker facing layoffs prays and rests. A student trusts through uncertainty. Faith's peace is a shield guarding the heart against chaos's roar. This is the 10th key: surrender worries to God for his peace-finding serenity in his presence. As we face failure, we'll see how faith restores. Failure feels final shame, regret, broken dreams, but faith offers renewal. Proverbs chapter 24 verse 16 declares, "A righteous man may fall 7 times and rise again." Micah chapter 7 verse 8 adds, "When I fall, I will arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me." Lucas, recovering from addiction, faced shame and fractured relationships. Despair beckoned, but God's grace became his lifeline, like Peter's restoration after denying Jesus. Lucas rebuilt his life, mending family ties through faith's redemptive power. Others rise too. A student overcomes academic failure. A parent rebuilds trust after mistakes. Faith believes in God's forgiveness, like a phoenix rising from ashes, offering new beginnings. This is the 11th key: rise, with faith trusting God's renewal to light the path forward. As we conclude, we'll see faith's transformative power woven through every trial. Faith is no mere ritual. It's a fortress for the mind, a way of life that transforms hearts through every storm. From Clara's trust amid loss to Lucas's redemption from failure, faith builds an unshakable foundation. Javier, a victorious mindset. Amara, courage to conquer fear. Sophia, peace in chaos. Elena, resilience in collapse. Michael, clarity in decisions. Priya, patience in waiting. Hannah and David, identity in God's truth. Zoe, boldness against fear. Caleb, serenity amid turmoil. Grace and restoration after failure. Lucas. Each story woven with biblical truths: Job's endurance, David's triumph, Peter's renewal, shows faith's strength to anchor the soul. Picture a lighthouse standing firm in crashing waves, its light unwavering. That's faith guiding us through trials with hope, courage, and peace. Faith doesn't exempt us from pain, but equips us to rise above it, transforming how we see ourselves and our struggles. It's the choice to trust when answers linger, to stand when others fall, to find peace when chaos reigns. Share your story of faith's triumph, how it carried you through loss, fear, or failure. Join others in prayer, trusting God's promises to renew and sustain. His truth endures, offering a hope that lights the darkest paths, a strength that holds through every storm, and a peace that guards the heart forever.